We're Team T, and we are on a mission to visit all the national parks in the lower 48 states. So far, we've traveled to 44 different parks, and in the summer of 2025, we visited the Pacific Northwest. We flew into Seattle, Washington, and went right downtown to the Seattle Center, which has the Space Needle, the Museum of Pop Culture, and the Chihuly Glass Museum. Of course, we had to visit the public market along with the very first Starbucks.
Make it snow! Make it snow!
The crowds were a little much for us in Seattle, so we drove up to North Cascades National Park, where the highlight is no doubt the glacial-fed Diablo Lake. We returned to the north side of Seattle and visited Deception Pass State Park, where we enjoyed tide pooling at Rosario Beach. Well, we made it to number 40, Mount Rainier National Park. We stayed in Packwood, which is just outside the southeast corner of the park, and we had heard all these stories of people who visited and never got to see the mountain because of the fog. But we had 3 days of beautiful weather, and the first day we traveled to Sunrise to hike the Fremont Lookout Trail. Next day, we traveled to the Paradise section of the park, where we know that the Skyline Trail is the most famous trail, but we enjoyed the Moraine Trail because it was completely empty and we had all these wonderful views all to ourselves. Next, we drove to Port Angeles on the north side of the Olympic Peninsula to visit Hurricane Ridge in Olympic National Park. We also spent time at Salt Creek Recreation Area just outside of Port Angeles for some more tide pooling. The next day, we traveled west to Crescent Lake, which was a beautiful blue. We hiked around a little and then made it to Rialto Beach, where we spent time relaxing and just loving the beautiful sounds of the water. After spending the night in Forks, Washington, we spent a day hiking around the Hoh Rainforest. Olympic National Park is known for its diversity. There are the mountains of Hurricane Ridge, the trees of the Hoh Rainforest, and we spent our third day just walking around looking at tide pools on the West Coast beaches. One of our favorite days was when we traveled down the coast, stopping at so many unique little towns. The first was Aberdeen, the home of grunge music and Kurt Cobain. Of course, when you visit Astoria, Oregon, you've got to visit the Goonie House and do the Truffle Shuffle. We We stopped at the Tillamook Cheese Factory, but the highlight of the day was the giant sand dune in Pacific City. There are so many fun stops down the Oregon coast, and Amber was really hoping to see a whale, especially at Depot Bay, but unfortunately, no whales this year. This brings us to National Park number 42, Crater Lake. This was the biggest surprise for us. We were expecting it to be really boring, but turns out it was fantastic, especially when we made the hike down to the water and jumped in. We made it to Northern California in park number 43, Redwood National Park. Before we hiked around in the park, we visited the Trees of Mystery. We thought it'd be like this little kid attraction, something you find in Gatlinburg, but turns out it was so much better. We especially liked the part where you could hike up in the trees. After a visit to In-N-Out, something we have to do when we visit California, we visited our final national park, Lassen Volcanic. Hiked the Paradise Meadow Trail, and then we stayed in a cabin in the main campground where we enjoyed a beautiful sunset that evening. The next day we woke up, we drove around the park and saw especially Lassen's Peak, and we enjoyed the hike at the Bumpus Hill Trail. It reminded us of Yellowstone. We absolutely loved our time in the Pacific Northwest, and we can't wait to get back out there again. Well, that's 44 parks down, only 8 to go in the 48 states. Thanks for watching.